This is Christine King. We're going to talk about how she has been a professional, or at one point in her life was a professional musician, and through like that sort of entrepreneurship was making a living as a bluegrass fiddle player. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to talk about how she can, or how she did make a career out of music, and how that's possible, and if that's even recommended. Okay. So Christine, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll just throw this out there, a plug for another episode on there is connecting with Christine allowed us to get Brittany Arneson on. And so huge props to Christine for making that connection. So whenever you listen to that episode, is thanks to Christine.
Oh, you're very welcome. She's amazing.
Yeah, super cool. All right, let's give me a brief overview of what you're doing now and the multiple things that you've done up until then, and then we'll kind of microscope in on Bluegrass.
Sure. Right now I have a day job that I work full time. I'm an IT project manager for the U.S. Air Force. We do Salesforce implementations and digital transformation, which in and of itself is an interesting combo: government, digital transformation, but we're making it work. We're trying to join the modern day and make those government systems more useful, more user-friendly. I'm here today because we are all trying to get into the self-storage investment game, grow wealth through owning businesses and real estate, and kind of being our own bosses. So that's kind of how we met.
Yep.
I actually went to college for natural resources management first. I worked in watershed science. I worked for the Forest Service. I was poised to go to graduate school, and I got an offer to be in a bluegrass band. And that was sort of an offer I could not refuse. So I went full time into that world of being an independent musician, independent artist, and trying to navigate the music industry, especially as kind of a small player, which is a struggle, can be worth it, especially if it's really your passion. After kind of trying that for a while, I'll tell you about my pivot point when I realized that I needed to move on to the next chapter. I was really interested in healthcare. Part of my experience in being in a bluegrass band was traveling the country. I've been to all 50 states, played in most of them, and witnessing the state of the general public and health in America made me really interested in being in healthcare. I love being the side person, actually. I'm very type A, but I love being the supporting role of somebody who has a vision. Mm-hmm. And so I got into nursing. I went to nursing school, and I was in high-risk labor and delivery. So if you don't know what that is, I basically helped deliver babies and supported moms through one of the most transformational experiences of their lives. And then COVID hit. I think we all have a COVID pivot story.
Yeah.
And realized that for my own mental health, I kind of needed to get out of healthcare. I had a really great opportunity in healthcare, actually, to be a subject matter expert and help change the digital interface and the software that nurses use in order to better deliver care and get credit for that care so that the hospital in general can get more money and better standing, more resources, essentially. And that made me really interested in the interface between humans and technology. And having worked inside of the system, healthcare system specifically, realizing that one person in the system really can't make that big of a difference. But if we can work to change the system to fit the person, you can try to transform the experience of those within it. So I got into IT project management. My joke now is that I used to deliver babies and now I deliver software.
I like that.
Because all of my soft skills actually transferred almost one-to-one. The content was different. I'm not doing medicine, I'm doing tech, but managing people, communicating complex ideas at a simple level, stakeholder management, having a vision, all of that is the same between nursing and IT project management. So that's what I do in my day job now. And kind of recently got into self-storage investing. And I think part of that is actually harkening back to my experience as an entrepreneur in the music industry, because I have a lot of those skills. I have that drive, and knowing that anything that I put into this business, I get out of.
Yeah.
I can control kind of the system of my own business versus operating in healthcare or government. Sometimes you can see the way forward, but there's a lot of roadblocks.
Yeah.
Versus if you're the entrepreneur, pros and cons, but it's all on you, and that can go either way, right? But having that control and that almost leverage to know that I can leverage my own skill set to get a certain outcome is what I'm really interested in. So that's kind of where I'm headed.
Oh, that's awesome. There's so many cool things in there. I think what you just talked about is something that so many of us resonate with. Like, you have the security of your 9 to 5, if you will, but you have entrepreneur blood running through you.
Definitely.
And you can't just get rid of that, like
Yeah.
it's there and you have to do something about it. And so that's why you're here and you're pursuing self-storage. And I think that came from early on through your ventures in Bluegrass. And so a lot of people, myself included, have this thought that maybe it's difficult to make a living as a musician, right? And so, like, some of us might have had that music background and decided, no, like, I can't really make a career doing that. So how did that look for you guys? Like, what, I guess monetarily, like, what was that like, and why did you eventually decide to pivot from that?
Sure. So it is definitely possible to make money in music, even as a small player, but you have to be much more creative and you have to be a hustler, for lack of a better term. When I was a professional musician, I did the music and the band and everything required in the band, and we'll get into that primarily, but I also had all these random side jobs. I taught little kids fitness classes, I walked dogs, I taught fiddle lessons on the side. Sometimes, especially in the beginning, you just have to make it work, and sometimes that looks like a very long day and no days off. So I think those people who are willing to do that are going to be successful. If that doesn't appeal to you, or you get into it and you realize, wow, I really would love to be able to clock out at the end of the day and do my hobbies, or I want a guaranteed paycheck, like, that's a little harder to make fit into the creative box, but it's still definitely possible if you're willing to put in that kind of creativity and hustle. For us, so I was in a band called the Rail Splitters. We were out in Boulder, Colorado, and we had some initial success because we won a couple band competitions. So we won the Rocky Grass band competition, and if you don't know Rocky Grass, it's in Lyons, Colorado, and it's one of the premier bluegrass festivals in the country. And one of the perks of that is that if you win the band competition, you get to open the festival on the main stage the next year, which is really great. We also won Pickin' in the Pines, which is in Flagstaff, Arizona, and it's the same deal where you get to open the festival the next year. Wow. So we did have a little bit of boost in the beginning that made it possible for us to go all in. Sometimes you have to have a little bit of evidence up front that, like, oh, wow, this could work.
Proof of concept.
Exactly. Yep. Proof of concept. One of the things that we dealt with when we were first starting is, yes, we did have that proof of concept. We had a little bit of oomph going into it. It might be different now. This was about 2013, 2014. But in order to get sort of the team built around you that you need, you have to have a certain level of momentum. So, for example, we were ready to play the bigger venues. We put on a great show. We had great original music. We worked so hard on our product, which was our live performance. But in order to get into those bigger venues, you have to have an agent. The booking agent has the relationships. The festival booker wants Alison Krauss as their headliner. The agent for Alison Krauss, not speaking for Alison Krauss, but that her agent is like, well, I'll give you Alison Krauss, but you have to take these other bands that are on my roster as well. That's kind of how the industry works at that level. But in order to get a booking agent, we needed a certain number of social media followers. So we had to work really hard in the beginning to get our social media followers to a certain number. And we have a lot of integrity, so we weren't willing to pay for likes. We wanted them organically. And we were kind of, I don't want to say a ragtag group, but we had a very broad skill set as people.
Were they actually looking at your social media number?
Yeah, and Instagram and Facebook.
So it was like the entry is 10,000 followers or whatever. No way.
Yes, we literally had people say, we don't talk to anybody with less than, let's say, 10,000 followers. And so we had to get to that level.
You're right. People are buying their followers. Like, there's no way to tell if that was like organic or not. Wow. Okay. Yeah. I had no idea.
And we maybe could have taken a shortcut, but ultimately I feel like that doesn't pay off in the end.
No.
And part of the appeal of hiring a band, from the promoter standpoint, is I'm going to hire this band so that I can then have some sort of guarantee I'm going to sell tickets, right? Especially festivals, they're outpouring a lot of capital in the beginning, hoping to make it back through ticket sales, but those aren't guaranteed. So the musical acts that they pick are vital. and the popularity and the draw of those bands is really what gives them their profit in the end. And usually it's very small. Festivals actually usually lose money. But, we were all hobby musicians when we started. We had an orchestra teacher, we had a hairdresser, we had a air traffic controller, we had a psychologist, and me. And
Cool.
so we all kind of realized, like, this is going to be a business. We need to take on all of the roles of the business. And since we can't hire folks right now, each of us sort of took on a different role. So we had our mandolin player was the financials. He dealt with our accountant. He did the bookkeeping. He did all of the payroll, all of that. Our orchestra teacher did the e-commerce side. So we had merchandise, we had CDs, we had t-shirts, we had hats, we had stickers. So she was in charge of like inventory and ordering and figuring out how much to bring on the road with us. I was in charge of social media and marketing. I knew nothing, literally nothing. I went to YouTube and I was like, how to do social media?
When was this?
Like 2014.
Okay.
Yeah. And especially that was so vital to getting to the next level. We needed an agent. We kind of had to, bootstrap a little bit and come up with marketing campaigns that we thought would work and get us, into the algorithm that was there at the time. And we went to a lot of conferences. We went to one of our pivot points as a band was we went to the International Bluegrass Music Association conference in Raleigh, North Carolina. And we had a showcase artist. So we applied. Okay. They picked us. We got to do 3 showcases throughout the week. And then we played at the World of Bluegrass Festival that weekend that's associated. And through that, we had a whole campaign leading up to that. At that festival, we met the agent who ended up signing us.
Okay, that was going to be my next question. Is like, were you guys ever signed? What label and how many years in?
Yeah.
Did that take you?
Yeah, so we signed with Myriad Artists. Shout out to Trish. She's awesome. I think it was about a year after going full time, maybe a little less. But yeah, it felt like a long time at the time, but it was actually pretty quick for us.
Yeah, in my head, I was thinking like a few years. But I'm getting off on a tangent. That reminds me of Nickelback. I know everyone has their opinions of Nickelback. I like Nickelback. I also like Creed. I'll put it out there. Judge me if you want, but everybody knows the words to those songs, so like it worked, right? But they played all the gigs. They put in the time. Like it was no gig too small. 5 drunk dudes in a dirty bar.
Oh yeah, we played those too.
So was it like that?
Yes.
Okay.
There was one point that we were on the road so much. I was gone about 3 weeks out of every month. I decided that I was going to be homeless. I gave up my lease. I put all of my stuff in storage, ironically, considering where we are. And I had a P.O. box. And for the week that I was home, I stayed with my boyfriend. I literally had no home.
Okay, so you're hitting on a lot of things here, right? Okay, there's proof of concept. It's gaining that initial traction however you can. Even if it has to be like small venues or something to gain some sort of authority or notoriety. So that proof of concept, it's delegating the aspects of the business, because sure, you're a musician, like, and maybe it doesn't feel like it's supposed to be business, but like to make it full time, to make it something, you have to run it like a business. Yeah. So you were in charge of social media. Everybody had their own little thing. Yeah. And then you went all in, and so it's that commitment, it's the risk that I think entrepreneurs are accustomed to, or it's maybe, for lack of a better term, like inevitable. There's a risk that you have to take at some point. Yes. In yourself, however calculated it might be. It's like, yeah, I've never really looked at the music industry that way.
Yeah. Well, and there's so many more jobs than I ever knew, even before I got into it. So, I talked about the financials and the e-commerce side with our merch, and I did social media and marketing. Our banjo player's job was to act as the tour manager, because that's a totally separate job. Advancing the gig, you call the venue a couple days before and make sure you know all the details. They have the details that they need from you. You coordinate with the agent. You make sure all the travel plans are set. There's so many admin tasks that are associated with just getting from point A to point B in a van. And if you're on a long tour, I mean, we were out for 3 weeks at a time. That's a massive job.
Mhm.
And depending on how your agent schedules you, and that's in and of itself a task, availability of venues versus route. There was one time we played right outside of Washington, D.C. on a Thursday night for a concert series, and we were due in Orland, Wyoming on Saturday morning.
Okay.
DC to Wyoming in a van in about 24 hours ish.
You
Drove
have
overnight.
some van stories.
And, we're on a shoestring budget at that time. So we had a very used 16 passenger van, broke down several times. Like there's just all sorts of struggles and challenges that just pop up, and you just learn how to deal with the challenges as they come. And that can be really draining, but also really exciting sometimes, depending on the challenge, right?
I want to read a blog or watch a blog of yours talking about that past life, like a documentary or something. I want to see what that's like. That would be really fascinating. Just like the van life, some sort of traveling musical artist that isn't big, but they're not small. They're just kind of in the middle and they're grinding. I think
Yeah.
that's really fascinating.
Yeah.
That's kind of where you guys were at.
We were definitely grinding. Our catchphrase was make the glamour stop, because the music business and, big artists, but also little artists, especially people like, the Grateful Dead really glamorized the road life. The open road, the mystery of the road. It actually is not that fun. Especially, we played a gig in Oregon one time. I think it was in Portland. And at the end of the night, we owed money because they had spent money to market our show. We didn't have a draw in that market yet. It was still kind of at the beginning of our touring life. So we're trying to expand outside of Colorado. And the venue had paid to get our advertising in local radio stations and newspapers and stuff like that. And there were so few ticket sales that at the end of the night, we owed the venue money. Yeah.
That's rough.
It is rough. Yeah.
I feel like we're highlighting all of the negative things, and that's okay. Like that's the reality of the business that you were in. So if somebody is a musician and has that burning desire to share their music, because that's so important. Like that's whatever that gift is that you have, it's hard to keep in. And so if you have that and you need to share that, like there's nothing that you can do. You need to get that out. It's part of you. And you got that out. It was rough. It was a hard time. So if there's somebody that has that in them that they want to share their gift, what would be your recommendation on how to pursue that life?
Yeah. So I think today there's so many ways to share it that maybe there weren't when I was doing it, or they weren't nearly as popular or as monetizable. We spoke off camera about Patreon. That's such a great way to share your gift for folks who are really interested in it. And you get sort of that recurring revenue stream and model, and you don't have to tour. Touring has so much overhead that the financials and the economics of it don't always make sense. I'm not going to downplay the thrill of playing on a giant stage in front of people who know your songs and they're singing along. It's the most amazing feeling. So if that is what you want, is that stage presence and that live experience, you just have to learn how to adapt to the rest of it. The playing on stage is 3 hours of your day. Getting from point A to point B is the rest of the day. The 3-hour amazing gig at the festival gets you going and makes your blood pump and you're just feeling on top of the world. But then you play the gig where you owe the venue money at the end of the night. You just have to learn how to balance and know that it's all even in the end and really focus on the benefits. I would really push anybody who's wanting to be a creative, and especially a musician, to lean into social media, YouTube, these things where you can share for really low cost, invest in some, higher quality, few pieces of recording equipment. We spent so much on recording studios, and there's a place for that also, for sure. But in the beginning, you really don't need that in order to put out content. We're filming a podcast in basically a closet.
Yeah, it's really raw. We've got boxes everywhere. This is low budget here. Stay with us.
This is the grind.
This is the grind. Yeah, yeah, exactly. This is the bluegrass grind. We might not be traveling and playing in dirty bars, but we're filming in a closet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think too, the authenticity factor, I think that word is maybe overused now. Authentic, is it authentic? I'm authentic. But it's true. Like audiences can really tell if you're there and you're sharing your authentic self,
Yeah.
your authentic experience, versus listened to, Chapel Roan and you're like, that artist is really hot. I'm gonna write a song that sounds just like that.
Mhm.
Like people can tell that you're not being genuine and authentic. So whatever that is that's inside you, share it authentically and people will respond to you.
I love that. Christine, you and I, we could talk for a
We
long time.
could.
I mean, seriously, we were talking in the hall, and I'm like, "Oh, I love your energy. Let's do this." And then we talked for like 15 minutes before, and now we found out that we know very similar people, which is so cool because that's like a past life of mine.
Yeah.
That I'm from Denver, and we know the same people, and it's so cool. Yeah, I want to circle right back around to that last point that you made, and just reiterate that about being authentic, and that goes for anything that you're doing. For you guys, it was, you're not going to buy followers. You're going to do it organically, and you're going to be authentic and true. If you're just starting, it's providing the value that you have to give, being authentic, genuine. And I think especially with a lot of the AI that's developing exponentially, people want people, and people are drawn to genuine, authentic humans. And we want more of that now that there's less of that. And Christine, you are unapologetically authentic. And so I really appreciate you and your time. How can people follow you, get in touch with you? You're the social media guru.
With a lowercase g. I'm on Instagram at Christine_the King. My last name is King. Sometimes the King is a woman. And that's where I primarily share my self-storage stuff, some of my fiddle stuff, and my dog photos. So that's really the best place to get a hold of me.